This week on the Soul-u-tions podcast, we're going to be talking about how to have money conversations with your spouse. This comes up a lot, especially with middle-aged couples where one person in the couple is out earning the income for the family and the other person is managing the money of the house. So I'll meet you on the other side of the introduction and we'll get down to it. Einstein said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." Most everyone in the world is solving their problems the wrong way. Our problems come from our thinking, and we can solve them with our thinking. So whether you're at your lowest, just trying to grow, or whether you are trying to sustain growth over your lifetime, join us as we push the boundaries of our current thinking and redefine how we find solutions.
The hope and the strength and the love and the smiles and the laughter of friends and family. Add it up, you'll find no limit to the possibilities.
It's nice to be back in the recording studio again. It has been a couple of months since I've been here. And over that time, I have been coaching lots and lots of couples and individually. And one of the topics that has been coming up in the coaching sessions, and this is whether you are a gentleman client of mine or a lady client of mine, money and marriage. It is a bit of a hot topic. And I think there are several things coming into play here with money and marriage. First of all, I don't think you can underestimate the impact that the money story of your family of origin has on you as an individual and on you as a couple, especially if you have different money stories in your families of origin. For example, for some people, their dad took care of all of the finances and their mom was just like, I don't do math. I don't know how to add and subtract in my checkbook. And I just let him take care of all of it. In other families, it's the woman who does it. Like that was the way it was in my family that I grew up in. My mom was all about the money. My dad earned it, but my mom had charge of the checkbook and was in charge of spending it and keeping up with all of it. And my dad was very, very hands-off with money. For some people, it is a real triggering point in a relationship, especially if you can remember growing up in times where money was scarce and you might have overheard your parents fighting about money or talking about like needing to make things stretch. And the other person in your life, maybe they didn't have a stressful money story, or maybe their money story was stressful in other ways. So I want to, as you listen to this podcast, and as I go through the examples of how I think you can improve your money conversation, and I really want to say this, like I cannot tell you the number of times people say, we've had the same conversation for the last 20 years, nothing changes. And what they're saying to me when they say that is, and I don't think this thing that you're going to tell me today, Tara, is going to change a thing. We're just stuck. We're hopeless. There's nothing we can do about it. I'm going to ask you to just, what was that thing in English class that a willing suspension of disbelief. That was it in literature class. I'm going to ask you to hold a willing suspension of disbelief here, because I promise you are going to hear something today that will indeed change the outcome of your money conversation that you're having in your house. And so take a moment to just, because it is a triggering conversation, if you can see me on the video channels, You will see that I have closed my eyes right now. But I want us all to take a moment to just ground ourselves. Put our hand over our hearts. Take a deep breath. A second deep breath. And an exhale. And a third deep breath. And feel yourself really grounding, coming to a place of centeredness within yourself, coming to this place where your hand is over your heart, where you have a lot of self-compassion for yourself, whatever your money stories are, whatever your relationship is with money. I want you to come to a place of neutrality here. And I want you to be open to the idea that you can change your relationship with money, that you can change the conversation in your house around money, and that perhaps it may even become one of your favorite things to talk about. That might be a bridge too far for some people, but that is my ultimate goal for everyone here, that we begin to have a sense of ease in our conversations about money. But before we can have a place and a sense of ease about how we talk about money, we have to kind of come to the very real place of where is the conversation that you are coming from, the most recent conversation that you had in your house about money with your partner. Here are a couple of examples. I hear people say, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I don't have a job. I don't have an income. Is that you? Make note of it. My wife thinks that we should be able to have all the things and that I should just be able to make all the money to provide for all of the things. And she has no idea of what it takes for me to make the money. Other things that people come to me and they talk about when they have the money conversation, they're like, I just wish I had a stash of cash where I could just have my own money and not have to have a conversation about it. Some people say, I feel like a second-class citizen in my marriage. I don't feel equal because I'm not earning any money. I'm not bringing any money in. And wherever you fall, like in the relationship, in your marriage relationship, in your relationship with in your partnership about money, I want you to really take a bit of an inventory, just a moment. Like, do you feel like you're equal partners when it comes to money in your relationship? Or do you feel like a second-class citizen? Now, I just want you to make a note of which one of those positions you feel like. Because here's the thing about having the money conversation. We want to get you as close to feeling like you are an equal partner when it comes to money decisions. And that is whether you are the husband or the wife, whether you are the breadwinner or the spender and manager of the household funds. It truly should not matter which one you are. But if you think it does matter, and if you think that one position puts someone in a higher position than the other, if there's any sense of inequality in this money conversation, that is the place that we want to begin. Especially if you feel like you are in an inferior position. And what I think is really interesting about this, I do have the breadwinners in the family who also feel like they're in an inferior position because they don't feel like they are providing enough for their family. And similarly, like I said, there are people who aren't earning the money. They will report feeling like a second-class citizen. So I think it's very interesting to kind of come to a sense of understanding of this idea of it really doesn't matter which position that you're in when either side can feel like they are in an inferior position. So let's take this example here. You are having coffee with your spouse and you're going over let's say the end of the year finances. And you're like, oh, yeah, spent this much, spent that much, spent this much, spent that much. And your partner's like, holy crap, we're a sinking ship. How are we going to be able to keep this up? And you're like, oh, we're going to be fine, honey. And to which the person's like, no, we're not. We're not going to be fine. And the next thing you know, you find yourself either outside watering the plants in your underwear or upstairs organizing your underwear drawer. And you have retreated to your separate corners of the house and you've just said to yourself, I cannot have this conversation again. I feel so embarrassed about everything involving money. Okay, so this is where I want you to hit the pause button and go back and think what your money story was from your family of origin. Just write it down, make a note of it. Was it an easy conversation? Did you ever see your parents talk about money? And when you saw them talk about money, were they fighting about money? Was it tense? Or was it an easy conversation? Have you ever witnessed anyone have an easy conversation about money? And if you have, I want you to make note of that too, because that easy conversation that you witnessed is something that we want to get really curious about, and we want to let that serve as evidence, as that it's possible to have an easy conversation about money. Okay, so just really think about all the things that go into this conversation that we have. And as we've just mentioned, that past experience is a big one. And then the other thing that we've already spoken about is how you feel in your current relationship, whether you feel like an equal partner when it comes to money, or you feel like you're not providing enough, or that you are a second-class citizen because you don't earn the money. Now we want to see how this current relationship is. And now I want you to go into the future. So we've thought about your past, right? Money story, thinking about your current money story. And then I want you to go into that future money story. And how would you like it to be? Now, I know you want it to be that hidden stash of money. You never have to have the conversation. But putting that one on the bedside table, if you have to have this conversation on a regular basis, really, dream forward. What would you like this conversation to be like? Do you want it to be easy? Do you want it to be someplace where you feel respected, where there's a place of mutual respect in it? And where could it just be something 100% neutral, which is kind of like you need to have toilet paper and laundry detergent and all of those things, you just need to have the money conversation too, right? It just becomes one of those simple, easy things to have in your life, like who's going to pick up the milk tonight from the grocery store conversation. That's what I mean when I say neutral. It's just not charged for you in any way. It's just something that you are able to engage in pretty easily. So the first thing I want to talk about, once you've done this, right? Once you've this is the past, you've identified your past, this is the present, and this is how I want it to be in the future, I want you to evaluate what is currently working for you in your money conversations and what isn't working for you and what you want to do differently. This is really the real approach. When I talk to people and they say our money conversations never changed in 20 years, it hasn't changed in 20 years because you probably haven't taken the time to evaluate what works when you have conversations with your partner, what doesn't, and what you want to do differently. And I want to make sure, if you are not on my email list, this is a free masterclass that I have that for when you join my email list, you get a 5-day video series. It's not overwhelming. It's super easy, that walks you through the evaluation process. It's something we do every Friday in the Soul-Shine Labs. We evaluate where we are in relationship to anything that we're working on, anything that we want to change in our lives. And so using it in particular for having the money conversation is something that I think will pay off dividends for you. So make sure, just hit the pause button right now, go to TaraSimkins.com and get your name on my mailing list, and then come back to the rest of this podcast. So one of the things when I'm thinking about my marriage, what works for us in our marital conversations, I usually know what doesn't work for us is someone's rushing out of the house in the morning. Maybe you've overslept. Maybe you're thinking about all the things that you need to do in the day. The other person has been up for an hour or so, has had 2 cups of coffee, and is ready to jump into a really good, deep conversation about anything. And the other person is not there yet. They haven't caught up yet. And so when you begin to learn a little bit about each person's, how you like to start your day, and when one person is open to a conversation and when one person is not ready to have any conversation about a hot topic, that is something to say, maybe not the time to have the money conversation over coffee. Maybe that's a time to have a connection conversation on something else. Maybe that's a time to just be easy. In my marriage, it really has become a place where we just make it easy. Get a hug in. I love you. I hope you have a good day. I look forward to seeing you later tonight. Just super easy and a sweet connection point. What I do know works for us in my marriage with Turner when it comes to having conversations, we do really well in a car, having conversations in a car, because we're side by side together. We're usually listening to music, and we're driving and we're moving, and it's just a sense of ease. But it's really interesting when you think about our energy, and this is a bit of some Chinese medicine here, or Chinese, what is that? Qigong is the name of it. So our energy sources are kind of come from the front of us and in our bellies. And so when we're straight across from one another, those strong energy forces are pointed directly at the other person. And that can add a bit of intensity to a conversation, because truly your power source is pointed directly at the other person. You could think of it as if you were pointing a water pistol or a gun at another person. Like, it's really your power, your energy is pointed directly at the other person. When you have a conversation to have with someone, and money being a big one, especially if it triggers both of you, being in a car, your power, your energy sources are both pointing forward and not at the other person. You're shoulder to shoulder. You're giving yourself some space where even your eyes aren't locking. Your eyes have something else to look at. And it softens the atmosphere. It allows you to deliver information or ask a question without it feeling like a strong attack and that the other person has to defend themselves. It also allows you some space for vulnerability to occur. I mean, what if someone says something and it does trigger you and you need a little bit of privacy or a little moment? When you're side by side like that, you can let yourself get choked up a little. You can let a tear come up in your eye and feel like you're not under a microscope of the other person looking at you. It feels a little safer to your body. So car conversations are great for us. Walking is a great way to have a conversation. Again, you're side by side. And I also find that sending an email on some subject matters like money, especially when you are trying to get your feet wet on this, that's a great way to have a conversation because the person can answer an email when they want to. It's just not like you in the morning over coffee, like barraging someone with questions. This is allowing you to get the information out that you want to share with someone in an email, and then it gives the other person the space and the time when they are looking through their emails and they see something from you, they can say, oh yeah, I want to get to that when. They don't feel like that's an emergency. They can get their work done, and usually when they come back around to that, they're in a little more relaxed position. The email situation with money also allows both of you time to digest what's in there and time to respond to it. And so I think that is something that works in my marriage when it comes to talking through money things. Like, it's really easy to say, hey, I was just looking back through last month's and I noticed that this didn't come in on this time and this didn't come in on this time. And by the way, this is going to come out at this time and this is going to come out at this time. You might want to follow up with so-and-so about that matter. And that way, you're feeling more like a partnership. You're feeling more like, oh yeah, I'm keeping you abreast of things. I'm looking ahead. This is the part I need your help on. You truly are approaching it more like a partnership. And you can take the time with your tone in your email to just let it be a little easier. And that works. So I want you to think back for yourself ways that you communicate about challenging situations or ways that communicate when it's easy. What works for you? What works for you and your partner? So take a moment to pause and just write out all those things that work. And then when you're finished with that, come back and we're going to talk about the things that don't work. All right. Whew. See, we're feeling a little more grounded now already because we're like, okay, we do talk about a lot of things that we have fun with and things that work. So now we're going to look at the things that don't work. And that's really an intentional part of this evaluation structure, to be grounded in what's working before we move to what's not. And I mentioned to you a couple of things that don't work for us. It's like that first morning conversation, like straight on one another. I'm going to tell you a secret of what doesn't work in conversation with a partner, especially about a triggery topic like money right now. And that is when you become defensive. I know it feels like the other person has said something and you now need to defend your position, and that feels like the right way to respond. But I want to offer you another perspective. One of my teachers, Byron Katie, has this quote. She says, "An act of defense is the first act of war." So when another person asks you a question and then you become defensive in your response, I really want you to look at it, think about it like a war thing, like they've just sent something your way and then you just armor up. All of a sudden you're just defensive. You've got all your guns lined up. You're going to defend your position. They now feel under attack. And I know you're being defensive because you feel like you were attacked first. But I guarantee you the other person doesn't think that their question was an attack, but they will read your defensiveness as an attack. So this is another one of those areas where I promise if you change nothing else, but you change this, you will change the money conversation for yourself. Again, put your hand over your heart. If you feel like you are defensive, give yourself time to take a beat. You don't have to answer the question right then. Like when someone says, "What were you thinking when you spent money on XYZ?" And if that feels like an attack to you, just put your hand over your heart and say, "Can I get back to you?" Can I get back to you on that? Like it really seemed reasonable to me at the time. I'd love to think about that more. Just give yourself some time and space. You don't have to come up with an answer in the moment. Super quick. Like I think one of the things that doesn't work, in addition to, timing of the conversations first thing in the morning and being like face to face, the face off and being defensive, is thinking that you have to come up with an answer in the moment and that it has to be the right answer. Because at that point, you're starting to put a tremendous amount of pressure on yourself to come up with what you think is the right answer that's going to help the other person understand your position. When instead, you totally miss the opportunity just to say, "Can we revisit this a little bit later today? I need to go out. I need to do things. I need to blah, blah, blah. This is an important conversation to me, and I'd love to revisit it." You can always buy yourself time and space. And with the idea and the intention that you understand, the more grounded you are, the more neutral you are in having the conversation, the better the conversation's going to go. I know it feels like the other person needs to get neutral too, and it would be helpful if they would. But if you're the one listening to this podcast, then you're the one that has the opportunity to get neutral first and to be the one who's leading the conversation in your marriage. Now we want to move to the next thing, which is, what do you want to do differently? And I've given you a number of ideas in this podcast, right? This idea of having the conversation in a car, having the conversation when you're walking side by side, having the conversation over email, when someone brings it up and if you're not ready for it and you're feeling triggered or defensive, like hitting the pause button and asking to revisit it. Those would all be examples of something you want to do differently next time. You may have your own idea of what you want to do next time that would be different than the way you've been handling it. And this is where the idea of the scientific method and experimentation comes in. This is why I call the Soul-u-tions Labs the Soul-u-tions Labs. It's because, as I said, on every Friday, we evaluate what worked, what didn't, what are we going to do differently. And what we are also doing is providing ourselves the time and space and opportunity to do something differently, and then come back and evaluate whether that thing worked or didn't work, because you might have to make a couple of go at it in order to find out how you can create a sense of ease in your own money conversations. And I want you to think about this. What if it took you an entire year to change the entire dynamic of your conversation with your partner about money? What if it took you 12 full months to effectively create a sense of ease in your money conversation? Would that be something worthwhile, to be willing to try something new, to fail at it, to not give up on one another, to not give up on the possibility of this being an easy place to communicate with your partner? Truly consider that. What if you did that for an entire year, and at the end of the year, you were like, I mastered this. We really, 90% of our conversations on this are super easy now. You would reap the benefit of that for the rest of your marriage. And guess who else would reap the benefit of that? Your children. Remember how we started out talking about what the money story is with your family of origin. So we started out with this idea that you carry that family of origin money story and the challenges and the feelings of lack and the feelings of trigger and insufficiency into your current marriage. And your partner did the same. And we talked about whether or not you'd ever seen or witnessed anybody have an easy conversation with marriage. Think about the gift you are giving to your children and your grandchildren, and you being willing to work through this conversation with your children, seeing that you and your partner are changing a conversation. You could even share it with them. Say, listen, this is something that we're working on. Mom and Dad are working on this together. We really want to overcome what the stories were that we were handed down from our parents on money conversations. The stakes are so much higher than we think in the moment. And when we can add that additional layer of meaning and say, golly, yes, it took me a year to figure out how to have this conversation with a sense of ease, but now I have 20 years of marriage left, 40 years of marriage left, 50 years of marriage left, and then my children's, all of their lifetime and their children's lifetime. You really begin to see that compound effect of you taking the opportunity and the time to do the work in your life now. And so, yes, it's easy to prioritize other things, but I promise you, if you decide to change the dynamic of this conversation in your marriage, it will repay you 100,000-fold. So give it a try. Don't expect to get it right the first time. Stick with it. Pre-decide how long you're willing to give it a go. And I would say a year. And even if you fall short from it being a place of ease, I promise you, you will be in a better place than you are now. And you can just keep going until it is easier. And it definitely will be. So you will never be able to say again, we've had the same money conversation for the last 20 years, because now you are going to be a person who changes their money conversation. And you may be a person who says, we had the same money conversation for 20 years, but for the next 40 years, we are definitely going to have a different one. Remember, pick up that free resource that I have on my website, TaraSimkins.com. Put your name in my email list. You will be delivered that evaluation and use it with your spouse on this conversation. And until next time, everyone, I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to talking to you again.
I ain't done living the life I meant to lead, and I ain't done loving the ones who cared for me. The hope and the strength and the love and the smiles and the laughter laughter of friends and family. Add it up, you'll find no limit to the possibilities. The left and the right and some faith in the fight, and your courage is all you'll ever need.